we believe that being a defender requires more than building shooting skills on a range. It's also a development of the heart, mind, body, and spirit. Join us as we explore what it truly means to be a defender in your training and in your everyday life. Welcome to Defenders Live. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Defenders Live. I'm your host, Laura Thorson, and tonight we're going to be diving into a really interesting subject that I don't think gets talked about a lot in the defensive community, and that is emotional and mental resilience. I titled the show Finding Peace Amidst Chaos with permission from good friend and former guest Ryan Luco of Impact, Montana, who recently put on a workshop titled the same name. My guest is Bethel Wagner, and she was one of the speakers at that event. And she talked about one particular tool in our toolbox that is with us all the time and one that we can utilize anytime on demand if we know how. So that tool is breathwork. It turns out that one of the fastest ways to shut off the fight or flight stress response is through breath. And so we're going to do a deep dive in how incredibly effective breath work is in regulating your nervous system, whether you're facing chaos in your everyday life or having trouble with mental management on the shooting range. Raise your hand if you have trouble with that. This episode will help you find peace amidst chaos in your everyday life. So stay tuned for that in just a bit. But first, if you're new or watching this as a replay, welcome. We're so glad that you're here. Please drop in the comments where you're watching from. I always want to hear from you guys. That is why this is live, so that you can interact with us in the comments. And this episode is brought to you by Locked In Grip. This week's episode is brought to you by Locked In Grip. Locked In Grip is a grip enhancer that keeps your hands free of moisture to create a slip-free connection to the action of shooting your firearm. Locked In Grip liquid shooting sports chalk is made for shooters by shooters. I also use Locked In Grip for lifting and any other grip type exercise I might need it for. Visit lockedingrip.com, lockedingrip.com to purchase your liquid shooting sports chalk today. That was a fancy commercial. Anyway, Adam Winch, the founder of Defenders USA, is off tonight, so I will be flying solo. So if the comments don't pop up on the screen instantly, that's why, because I'm going to try to do an interview and run the comments at the same time. If you're interested in learning more about Defenders USA, you can go to defenders-usa.com, click on the About page, and you can learn more about me, Adam, and all the other instructors at Defenders USA. Couple more announcements before we get started. Defenders Live is now officially on almost every podcasting platform, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So be sure to subscribe there as well and leave a review if you like what you hear. You can also make sure you don't miss another episode of Defenders Live by going to defenders-live.com, sign up for our email notifications, and also join our private Facebook group. So don't be shy. If you have comments during the broadcast, put those in the comments, and feel free to chime in. Hopefully we'll do a live Q&A at the end of the broadcast. I didn't formally ask Bethel if we could do that, but I'm sure that she won't mind, right, Bethel? So let's see if we've got anybody watching tonight. I see Casey from Texas is here. Hey, Casey, good to see you. Scars from Ohio. Hey, Scars. And Heather from Arizona is watching. And don't be shy, all the rest of you. I know that are watching, that aren't commenting. Go ahead and put that in the comments where you're watching from. Okay, so let's get right into the interview with Bethel Wagner. Bethel Wagner is a health coach, biofeedback specialist, Bowenwork practitioner, and trauma-informed breathwork facilitator. Her mission is to provide people with life-changing health care that identifies and solves the root causes of their health issues. Her passion is helping people learn the skills they need to become physically, mentally, and emotionally healthy and whole. She believes that emotional and spiritual intelligence is just as important, if not more important, than mental intelligence. This is an important piece of the life of a defender that is rarely taught. And she says we need to train our mind, our emotions, and our bodies in order to be well rounded people who are prepared to defend life. I could not agree more. Bethel lives in Montana with her husband, Sam, and their 6 children. She loves playing and teaching music, and she's very good at it, by the way. And she loves the great outdoors and training to be a defender with her family and her Defenders USA friends. Let's welcome Bethel onto the show. Hey, Bethel.
Hi.
Funny seeing you here.
I know.
Thanks for coming on to the show. We've got a lot to unpack tonight. So let's talk about this thing called breath work. Let's start at the beginning because some people may not know exactly what it is that we're referring to. And then why is this important to me and how can this help me on the shooting range or just in my everyday life? But let's start with what is breath work exactly?
So the simplest way to define breath work is that it is the intentional use of your breath. So your breath is the one thing in your body that can both run on autopilot, where you're not thinking about it at all, or you can actually use it intentionally. Not so much with other things. Like you can't decide that you're going to force your heart to beat, or you can't decide that you're going to force your stomach to digest food. But your breath, you can decide to use in a very intentional way. And the reason that's important is that when we do use our breath intentionally and breathe using our diaphragm, it actually helps to reset our entire nervous system.
Oh, that's kind of important sometimes. And I think having awareness of that is really important as well. One thing that I didn't mention that I wanted to before I started that asking questions was I asked Adam this before the show, and since he's not here, he typed out something for me to read. And I'm curious as to your opinion as well, because I do want to set the stage for why emotional and mental resilience is so important, and because it's part of the title of the show. But in your opinion, um, and I'll read Adam's answer here, but I asked why, in your opinion, is it so important that people develop mental and emotional resilience, especially as a defender of life? And Adam's response was because the moment will likely be sudden, shocking, painful, terrifying, and will cause one to want to cower in fear. Resilience mentally and emotionally is necessary to fight through pain, shock, and even denial. And it helps one focus on the task at hand and not reflect on the pain or surprise of it all. A defender must have as much resilience of spirit as possible. Would you agree with that?
Adam has been at this for so long. Like, I don't think I could possibly phrase it better than Adam did. And that's one of the things I so much love and appreciate about Adam is his whole focus on the heart set and the mindset and preparing yourself emotionally
Right.
and mentally, and even taking the time to consider if I'm really cut out for this. Am I cut
Right.
out to be concealed carry?
Right.
Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. And just being
Right.
really honest with yourself about that. That's
Right.
one of the things that I
Mhm.
really appreciate about him.
Right. And as we talked about, I think even in the last episode, having multiple tools in your toolbox isn't all just about the actual physical gun or the pepper spray or the whatever. The mindset part of it is like probably one of the most key components. So anything that we can do to help that, I think we should explore. So I'm so glad that you're here for that.
Thanks for having me.
So in your workshop, you said that I think you said this, and if you didn't, then correct me, but I thought you said that most people don't know how to breathe properly or they just don't naturally in their everyday life. Is that true?
That's true. The majority of people really only breathe at about 20% of their capacity, which is kind of shocking. And some of that is due to um, just stress. We get into stress and our breathing shuts down. Some of it is people have desk jobs, so they're slouched at a desk all the time, which physically closes them down, so they can't get a good breath. Sometimes it is more of a response to maybe traumatic situations in the past that kind of shut the body down. There's all sorts of different reasons why. And the other reason is, nobody teaches you. Doctors don't teach you or tell you about it. You don't learn it in school. Moms and dads don't necessarily teach you how to take a really good breath, other than maybe you fall down and scratch your knee and they say, okay, take a deep breath, but that's not really that instructive. A deep breath could be,
Right. So could you explain that a little bit more? Because I think that at least my perception going into listening to you at the workshop was, oh, well, I know if I need to calm down and take a deep breath, right? But there's so much more to unpack there. So could you kind of lead us down that that pathway? Because I was just shocked at all of the really cool scientific stuff behind it and how our nervous system is regulated. But then not only that, but the actual what we learned about how to breathe properly.
Right. So the majority of people are what we call shallow chest breathers. So they're really only breathing into the very top part of their lungs, and they're not using their diaphragm, which is really a major problem, because if you breathe without your diaphragm, you're missing out on the opportunity to regulate and reset your nervous system. And when you do that upper chest breathing, you're actually setting yourself up for feeling anxious, worried. It just puts you kind of into this negative pattern in your body, and even mentally and emotionally sometimes. So it's much more optimal to use your diaphragm to breathe. And one of the really cool things is that when you do that, your diaphragm is actually massaging the vagus nerve, which is one of your most important nerves. It starts at the base of the brain and it travels to all of your internal organs. And it also massages your spine. So it keeps your cerebrospinal fluid moving, which it wouldn't otherwise. It massages the heart and the lungs and the adrenals and all these different things when you breathe using your diaphragm, and it keeps everything working better. So sometimes if you tell someone like, oh, take a deep breath, they might go,
yeah.
And they breathe in and they tense their shoulders and they tense their neck, and they didn't actually use their diaphragm. They just did this. And that's not really very helpful. So it's much better to think about, okay, if I'm going to use my diaphragm, it's just like right underneath your rib cage, kind of like the shape of a football. If your diaphragm works, it comes down and it pushes down on those organs in the lower half of the belly. So if you're breathing correctly, your belly should actually expand kind of three-dimensionally, like a little beach ball. And then once that's full, then the rib cage can expand, and then the upper chest can expand. And that's a really good full breath that's functioning properly. So then you figure if you can get about 70% of the breath into that lower belly, and then about 20% filling the rib cage, and the last 10% in that upper chest, that's like super primo breath. And you want to be able to do all of that without creating extra tension. So you don't want to take such a deep breath that, again, you're feeling tension in the neck or the shoulders. And you don't want to exhale so hard that you're creating tension in the abdomen. You just want it to be relaxed and free and easy. And you'd be surprised how hard that is to do sometimes.
Yeah, it takes a lot of awareness.
It takes awareness and it takes some practice. Over time, it becomes natural, but at first it feels really weird to most of us.
It really surprises me how do I say it? The overlap between shooting a gun well and breathing well. It requires a level of presence and awareness, focus, and knowing what to relax and what to tense up, and how much of that. Do you know what I mean? So integrating this into your shooting on the range could be a game changer, really, because I took Brian Hill's class, I think it's like 3 weeks or a month ago, and we really got to practice mental management a lot, and breathing was a big part of that. And so for some people, I think he talked about most people need to calm down. Most of them are like their nervous system is whatever
Right.
you call the word. I don't know that it's hyperactive or whatever, because mine certainly is. And they need to calm down when they're shooting. But some people actually need to kind of like speed themselves up a little bit. So he had a certain breath pattern for that as
Mhm.
well. So I guess we shouldn't assume that everyone watching needs to calm down.
Right,
So
right,
what are the different breath patterns you would see for different needs, I guess?
right. So I guess to add to your point there,
Yeah.
about people who maybe are a little bit too calm or like it's like
Yeah, I
they
don't know
can't
what that is, but
activate.
yeah. Yeah.
That's there's kind of two extremes in the nervous system.
Okay.
And when the nervous system is out of balance, it can kind of get stuck at either end. So on the one end is yeah, like this super amped up, anxious fight or flight kind of response.
Mhm.
But on the other side, it's where the body just like collapses, it immobilizes, it's scared to move. And that's where
Mm.
you have to do something to kind of wake those people up a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah.
So, for people who are in more of that super activated, always anxious, always worried kind of mentality, and feeling that in their body all the time, you want to use a very calming breath pattern. And the simplest way to remember is in through your nose, out through your mouth. Again, breathing using that diaphragm and just really nice, slow breaths. So if you can do something like count in for 5 as you inhale and count to 5 as you exhale, that's a nice calming pattern. And then as you get into it, the longer and longer you can make the exhale, the calmer and calmer you're going to get.
Mhm.
Um, because your exhale is like the brake pedal and your inhale is more like the gas pedal. So,
Okay.
so the faster you're breathing, it's like stepping on the brake or
Mm.
stepping on the gas pedal. But
Yeah.
if you can slow it down and really extend that exhale, it's like gently pressing the brake and slowing the car down.
Okay.
So then for somebody on the other end who's like kind of immobilized and can't get motivated, you need to do a more activating breath pattern, in which case you might do something like all through the mouth. People maybe have heard of like the breath of fire. They'll do that like in yoga and different things. Or maybe people might be familiar like with Wim Hof breathing. So it would be like, and you don't even have to do that for that long. Even just like
Mm.
a minute is usually enough to kind of
I
wake up
would pass
the
out.
person. It doesn't have to be that fast. I mean, you can start
Okay.
small and it can be gentle.
Okay.
But those kinds of things are much more activating. Mouth breathing is very activating.
Oh.
And so it can actually help to draw a lot of energy into the system and wake you up and get you mobilized if you need to.
Huh. Interesting. And those types of breathing patterns, you don't have to do them very long for them to be effective. Like, I know it's different for everybody, but in general, how many good deep breaths would one need to make in order to make a change? Like, does that affect your blood pressure, your heart rate, all of those things?
All of the above.
Yeah.
It depends on the person and like how activated they are or not activated they are. It's
Mhm.
going to vary a little bit, but usually you will start to feel a shift in your body within a couple of minutes, 1 to 2 minutes. You'll start to feel at least somewhat of a shift.
Mhm.
Um, so that nice long exhale we were talking about is really good for slowing the heart rate down. And that deep diaphragmatic breathing actually improves what they call your heart rate variability. So when you're like in total stress mode, or like
Mhm.
even if you're exercising and your body is needing more blood and more oxygen, your heart rate goes pretty steady. It's just like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it just beats constantly. When you're relaxed, your heart rate actually will kind of increase a little bit and then it'll slow down and then it'll speed
Hmm.
up a little and it'll slow down, which is actually a really good thing. You want good heart rate variability. So
Hmm.
you can actually affect, yes, your heart rate, your blood pressure, all sorts of things by tapping into your breath.
Okay, cool. And also, feel free to interrupt me at any time for any reason if I'm skipping over something, but I wanna get to, like, the zones we talked about
Mhm.
earlier,
Yeah.
but first, I saw, like, a video on your website, I think,
Mhm.
which I should put up. Whoops, I'm not doing Adam's job very well.
It's hard to
Um,
multitask.
yeah, there's all of her information at the bottom. But if you go to the vlog, isn't there a part where you're talking about the wave?
Yes.
Could
Yep.
you explain what that is?
So it's basically that initial breath pattern that I was talking about, where you're breathing about 70% into the lower belly and then the last 30% in the upper half. And when I teach people, I've learned it's easier for them to feel it in two parts. And I'll just have them put one hand on their belly and one hand on their chest. And we'll just say, okay, breathe into the lower belly and fill that low belly first.
And you can feel that in your lower back too.
Oh yeah,
when you
it
do it
should
right.
feel nice and three-dimensional, like it expands
Yeah.
in the front and the back and the sides.
Mhm.
It's really like a beach ball expanding like this when you
Okay.
think about it. So they get good at filling that lower half, and then I'll say, okay, let's work on filling the top half and feel that expand. And they'll get good at that, and then we put the two pieces together, so it feels
Okay.
like a nice smooth wave.
So it starts at the bottom and then expands to the top.
Yeah, it fills the
Okay.
bottom, expands to the top, and then it almost feels like it kind of comes up the back of the head and just releases naturally.
Hmm.
So it's once you get good at it, it does feel like this nice, smooth, wave-like motion.
And then do you try to hold at the bottom of the stillness of the breath as well?
So I wouldn't necessarily say try to hold.
Okay.
If you're in a really good breathing pattern, there will be just this natural little pause at the bottom of the breath. You'll
Mhm.
inhale, exhale, and you'll notice that there's just a natural pause. And that pause is important. That pause is where your nervous system kind of resets itself.
Oh.
But you'll notice when you're stressed or anxious,
You can't find a pause.
there's no pause anywhere. So your nervous system just can't reset. It can't do what it needs to do.
Right.
So that little pause is important.
Okay.
And there are certain times where if you are doing some intentional breathing work, you will do what's called a top hold or a bottom hold, where you
Mm.
will pause and you'll just see how long you can hold before you take your next breath. But that's not part of normal everyday breathing. That's when you're like specifically doing an exercise and just training yourself.
So okay, it's probably like shooting where it's best to learn how to do the technique in dry fire, so to speak. So learn how to do the technique while you're calm and nothing
Right.
is going on. Practice it and practice it and practice it. And then hopefully you'll have that tool then when things start to escalate, and you will kind of already know how to do that intuitively rather than trying to practice it when you're already spinning out of control, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
It's hard
because
to
that's
learn
probably
things
what
on
I would
time.
try to do. Oh, yeah,
Right.
Bethel
I
told
mean,
me to do this thing. Yeah.
when you're in full on stress mode, that whole frontal lobe of your brain shuts down. So the
Yeah.
decision making center is gone. Like you can't
Right.
sit there and think, let's see, what should I do now? So
Right.
unless you've trained it to where it's kind of automatic, it's probably not going to happen. And I have one client in particular. She's been working on this for quite some time, and she's getting really pretty good at it. But she's like, sometimes it just like it's gone. I know there's something I'm supposed to do, so she repeatedly will ask me, would you please just make me the cheat sheet so when I get there, I can just look and it'll remind me and then I can do it.
Right. So it does take practice.
It does take some practice, but
Yeah.
just like shooting or anything that you practice, the more you do it and the more consistent you are, the more often you will notice that, oh, I'm getting into a bad breathing pattern, or, oh, I'm feeling anxious and triggered and I need to go
Right.
do this.
Right. That's a perfect segue into the next little part I want to talk about, which is developing awareness of the zone that you are currently in. And trying to mitigate it before you go into like the red zone. So
Right.
talk about what the different zones are there. It's not like scientific, you just kind of made it up, but it makes sense to most shooters because it kind of correlates with Cooper's color codes of awareness, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, really, the zones are ripped directly from the first class I took with Adam, and he talked about the zones.
Oh,
And
and
I
you're
was
like,
like, oh,
oh,
these two things go together.
right, right.
So, I mean, there's that white zone where people are just like, I'm home, I'm relaxed, I'm checked out, whatever.
Hmm.
Just, I feel safe. That's
Yeah,
really what you could call the white zone. I feel safe.
yeah.
I don't feel like I have to be on alert.
Hmm.
And ideally, that's where we would be doing our best breathing. The yellow zone would be kind of like, yeah, I just have maybe some vague uneasiness. I maybe can't pinpoint it, but there's something in my body or in the back of my mind that feels unsettled. And I think a lot of people live at least in the yellow. There are people who never get to a white. They're just like constantly mildly anxious. They don't know
Yeah.
why, they don't know what it is, but their nervous system is just always kind of slightly amped up.
Mhm.
And then, like, yeah, you could be moving into the orange zone where you are constantly stressed. And it may not be that you're really truly in any physical danger. It may be more, maybe there's some emotional things going on, or relationship things, or maybe there's financial stress or job stress, or those kinds of things that are just constantly hanging over you. And that just forces your nervous system into this constant state of like, I've got to fight this. I've got to run. I've got to do something about this.
Take action. Yeah.
Right, right. So your body just never relaxes and it never resets. Um, and then for some people, that can very quickly go from that like bright yellow or orange. Something can come into their day and trigger them, and it can very quickly go to hot red, or for some people, it actually goes to black. Maybe they
Which are the
dissociate.
2 spectrums you were talking about, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So red is very much like, in order to survive, I have to fight this. I have to run. Like, I have to activate. But sometimes there's something in our nervous system that goes, I actually don't have the resources to fight this. And I don't think I'm fast enough to run away. So I'm just going to play dead, because that might be the only way I'm going to survive this. So those are the 2 kind of spectrums. And it's happens faster than like your thinking mind can think,
Yes,
right?
it
It's
does.
actually
Yeah.
your nervous system. It's something called neuroception. Your nervous system picks up on it before your thinking mind even has a chance to think anything.
Right.
And before you know it, either you're hyperactivated or maybe you're just passed out on the floor and don't know.
Yeah, talk about that one, client you have. That isn't that what they literally did? They blacked out or something?
She's had that happen multiple times. And in that
Wow.
case, it's someone who has a very long history of trauma. She was abused for years by a family member as a child. And so there was a lot of stored trauma in her system. And for years, like, she didn't have very many tools to deal with it.
Right.
And she's had experiences where, there again, she didn't even necessarily know exactly what it was that triggered her or set her off, but either she would dissociate and be like, a couple hours later, she'd be like, I have no idea what happened. Could you fill
Wow.
me in on like what happened? Because I don't remember anything. Or she would just pass out.
Wow.
But
And that's her body trying to protect her somehow, right? That's the
absolutely.
survival mechanism.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow.
And a lot of people, I think, maybe feel ashamed of that or guilty about it, like, I should be stronger than that or tougher than that. But it's not that way. It's really truly your body and your nervous system are just trying to protect you, keep you from being hurt, whether physically or emotionally. And it will do what it needs to do. And it's actually this beautiful built-in mechanism that God placed in our bodies. So that's a really important thing, especially for people who have suffered a lot of trauma, to understand, like, there's nothing wrong with you. And it wasn't like something you did wrong. It was your body protecting you.
Wow. That's some deep stuff. So then where do we go from here? Then how can one utilize some of the tools that you're talking about before maybe they get to that red zone? Or what do they do if they're in the red zone? Is it too late at that point?
Well, not necessarily. If you've done some work to begin building that awareness, it's not necessarily too late to do something and sometimes the red zone's not bad. I mean, if
Really?
you are seriously in a dangerous situation, you need to be in the red zone. Your life
Right.
might depend on it.
Right. Okay.
So it's not bad. It's just when we get stuck there and we can't get out of it, that
Yeah.
it becomes a problem. Or when we're maybe in that zone inappropriately.
Yeah.
Like, maybe we're flipping our lid and we're about ready to yell at our child or our spouse. That maybe isn't appropriate. But if there's an attacker, heck yeah, stay in
Right.
the red zone and deal with it.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
So for some people, there's this weird disconnect, like there's not an awareness. And a lot of times it's because for some reason they've kind of cut themselves off from their emotions and they've shut down. And that can be for a lot of different reasons. It could be maybe they just grew up in a family that was kind of dysfunctional and no one ever taught them how to deal with their emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Or it could be they were really hurt by somebody and so they shut down and disconnected from their emotions and from their body. And so they don't have any awareness. They can't see it coming. And then they're just like all of a sudden exploding and they're not sure why.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of where that mental or that emotional intelligence piece comes in, is just learning to start to have an awareness. And that really truly is the first step, like being able to stop and ask yourself, like, okay, am I feeling anything in my body? And sometimes people are like, no, nothing.
Really?
That's the case for some people. They're like that disconnected. But there are
Wow.
other people who are like, yeah, I constantly have a knot in my stomach, or my chest always feels tight, or my heart is always racing, or I feel like there's a knot in my throat. Those physical signals are telling you what zone you're in.
Right.
Those are your cues. So if you
Right.
can just start training yourself, even once or twice a day, to just stop and check in and be like, okay, what's my heart rate doing? What's my breath doing? Do I feel tight anywhere? Am I tensing my shoulders? Do I have a headache? Do I have like a knot in my stomach?
Yeah.
Those are all cues you can start to pick up on. And then once you start to have an awareness of what your body is doing, and maybe even start to have an awareness of, okay, what emotion is that? I've got this weird butterfly in my stomach that won't go away. What is that? Maybe it's anxiety. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's sadness. There could be any number of things.
Or it could be all of them together.
And it can, yeah, that's the amazing thing about being human. We can hold multiple emotions all at the same time, which sounds kind of crazy, but I mean, we talk about, oh, that was bittersweet, or I'm happy
Right.
and sad at the same time. Like,
Yeah.
we really can't hold multiple things at the same time.
Right.
So just beginning to have that awareness is definitely the first step. And then once you start to feel like you're getting better at just being aware that it's there, then you can kind of add in that piece of, okay, what am I going to do with it now? Am I going to just let it sit here? Do I need to shift it, change it, face
That's the
something?
thing though, Bethel. I don't think people realize they can change it.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like they feel like they just deal with whatever the emotion is that's in their body or the feeling is, and they don't, I don't think, sense any kind of control over that at all. Would you
Right.
think?
Right. Yeah. I mean, definitely there's lots of people who are constantly anxious or constantly angry or constantly depressed and sad, and like they feel like they can't get out of whatever the emotion is.
Mhm.
But the truth is, I mean, God created us with that whole spectrum of emotions, the whole gamut, and they're all there for a reason and they all have a purpose. So it's important to not just like pretend they're not there or feel like one is good and one is bad. He
Mhm.
created all of them. So they're all meant to be there. It's just a matter of being able to notice them and then acknowledge them. And then, if needed, we can work through them and shift them in a healthy direction.
Right.
We're not meant to perpetually be in fear or be in anxiety. And through the breath and a lot of other tools, we can actually shift that.
That's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool.
It's pretty cool that it seems like it's something we already have all the time, and it's something that we can use if we choose to. I don't know, I just think that's so cool because, I mean, it is simple and complicated at the same time. It's very interesting to me.
It is. It's
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah, it is. I can see why you're into this. Um, what do you see most commonly with your clients? Like when somebody comes to you with breath work, or maybe they are just exploring what it even is. Do you see a common pattern of types of people or problems that come to you that you're able to help? Or is it all different kinds?
It's a spectrum. There's
Yeah.
all different types of people. I mean, but I'm probably the most common I see is people who have a lot of anxiety. That is
Yeah.
really common. Anxiety or panic attacks, or just a history of trauma that they're trying to work through in a healthy way so they can move forward in their life in a positive direction.
Right.
Um, and sometimes you will see people on the other spectrum who maybe are more in that immobilized state where they're maybe struggling more with depression or something of that nature. But in general, I would say I see more people stuck in on the other side where they're just like hyper vigilant, hyper activated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. So, as far as shooting goes, a common thing that I see as an instructor, and something I've had to work on myself, especially in the beginning, was holding our breath while we're shooting. I see this a lot on the line. What would you say to people that have a tendency to hold their breath while they're shooting? Don't do it. What could they do
Um, well,
instead?
it happens a lot. I mean, I catch myself holding my breath. Sometimes
Mhm.
I catch myself holding my breath on the line. Imagine that.
Mhm.
I catch myself holding my breath when I'm playing the piano, or catch myself holding my breath when I'm dealing with one of my kids. So there again, it just comes back to awareness and going, oh, yeah, I'm holding my breath. Okay.
And
Reset.
what is your body doing when you're holding your breath? Like, what's it trying to do? Resist something?
I think it's more of a control issue.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. At least for me personally, it could be different for different people, but
Yeah.
I think for me, it's like, I have to control the gun. I've got to grip the gun. If I'm really still, the gun's not going to move. And the best way to be still is to not breathe. The best way to control this child is for me to stop breathing. I can't control this child.
Right.
He's his own person.
Right.
I'll feel better if I just take a breath.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of it is kind of that control, and control is tied to safety, because we feel if we can control our environment, then we feel like maybe we're safe.
Which is an illusion.
It is an illusion, but it's a very common, it's kind of a subconscious thing that goes on without us even realizing it.
Right. So there again, awareness is key.
Awareness is key, and probably just having a great instructor like you or Adam who can just gently say, okay, I want you to let your breath out, and I want you to take another breath.
Yeah.
And as you
Come
release your
back to
breath,
the moment.
as you see your sights or see your dot come into where you want it, then you can press the trigger.
Yeah.
I think that's been one of the most helpful things to me. And I don't remember, it's probably been multiple instructors. I think Riley Bowman talked about it a bunch. And I know Adam probably has, talking about seeing your sights. Yep, they came up, they're coming back down. Press. It came up, It came down, and that gives you kind of permission to, oh, it's going to go up and down, and it's okay, which means it's okay to breathe, because when you breathe, it's going to go up and down a little bit.
Right. Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, I'm at the wall, and whenever it comes across the point I want to hit, then I'll just finish pressing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if only it were really that easy. I mean, it is that easy. It's like breathworks. I keep saying it's like breathwork. It's that easy and that complicated all at the same time, right?
What is it? Adam says it's simple, but it's, how does he say
Simple
that?
but not easy.
Simple but not easy. Something like that.
Yeah.
The principle is easy to understand. Actually doing it.
Right. The application is much harder, mean, that's with everything in life. We can know intellectually very many things inside of our wonderful brains, but applying those things to our life on a regular basis is the key. It's the kicker for most of us, isn't it?
Absolutely.
For sure. So, I wondered before we get to the Q&A, and by the way, guys, if you have questions for Bethel, please put those in the comments. We're going to be getting to the Q&A here shortly. Do you have options and I should put your website up again. Do you have options online to help
Yeah.
people, or do you do any remote
Yep.
help?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. We can do breath work remotely. When I first started my training, I was like, is this really going to work over Zoom? Like, I hate Zoom. I'd rather be in the room with the person, but I found out it actually is okay. I mean, I still prefer in person, but Zoom
Yeah.
works great as long as I can see the person, so I
Yeah.
know they're okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how you know they're okay.
Well, it's an important thing because
Right.
things can happen, so you want to have that connection, but it absolutely can work online for sure.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, we do have one question, and I'll probably think of some other things. Unless, is there anything that we skipped over?
One thing that did cross my mind that I think is really important, especially for firearms instructors, but I actually think for everybody who is ever on the range, on the line, is having trauma awareness. And that's because I think a lot of people come to the shooting world because they did have some sort of trauma or maybe a close call or a scary event that maybe made them go, hey, I think I need to learn how to shoot so I can carry a gun with me, because what just happened back there was not okay. But a lot of people who come in with trauma actually, they need to be handled with care. I mean, everybody needs to be handled with care, but just having some awareness of, because they might not just come right out and say, hey, I had this traumatic
Right. Usually
experience,
they don't. Yeah.
because it usually feels really vulnerable and they're not going to just blurt that out. So just having that awareness and knowing what some of the cues or the signals might be, so that you can kind of pick up on that and be aware of it and be extra careful in the way that you interact with that person, is probably really especially important. And just being aware of, those people might be a little bit extra jumpy. They might startle easy. They might have funny things. I shouldn't say funny, but they might have things like they really have to be oriented a certain way, so they feel like they're aware of what's in their environment. They might need you to slow down because there might be too much information coming in for them to process, and it might just overwhelm. They might need the speed of the class or the material to be slowed down. And they might just need you to even just come up and help them take a deep breath and calm their nervous system down so they can feel safe. And also, just for other people on the line, you might have someone on either side of you or somewhere in the class where you're like, man, that person has some really weird, like, little behaviors, or like, why are they doing that? Or why are they so jumpy? Or like, why are they so nervous? And it might just be that they don't feel safe. So I think just that awareness is really important.
Are there any like nonverbal cues that you can think of off the top of your head besides holding their breath or being jumpy? If you're really paying attention, usually you can read it off of people pretty easily.
Yeah. I mean,
But it's hard to describe sometimes.
Yeah, it is. It's usually in the body language. It's as long as you can slow down and just tune in, which I think like you're really good at. You're usually pretty in tune with your students.
I try to be.
Yeah, usually you'll kind of pick up on body language or just kind of their overall energy that they come in with. And sometimes
they're really quiet too. It's
they
not
could be,
always they're jumpy. Sometimes they're
right.
very reserved.
They could be super quiet. They might just seem like they're, I don't know if lacking confidence is the right term, but they're like really hesitant or timid maybe. That could be one direction that it goes. Or scared of like, I'm going to get it wrong. Sometimes a response is, some people are like hyper perfectionistic or hyper independent. There's kind of a whole spectrum. But those are just all things to kind of be aware of.
And then also sometimes I'll see a lot of overstimulation. You can usually tell,
Right,
especially
right,
when the guns are going off around them, you can
right,
really see them, responding to the sound. And
right,
that can really trigger people sometimes. So that's
right,
really important to be aware of, because once they've disassociated with where they're at in the present moment and their brain leaves, that's when they become unsafe. So
right,
as soon as you start seeing them separate from their brain, you need to make sure you're with them. And if they need to take a break, that's okay,
right,
or
right.
yeah,
Which is something else that you and Adam both do a beautiful job of, is just kind of normalizing that and saying, it's okay. Like, if you need a break, take a break. It's
right,
fine.
right,
Don't push past it. Just
right. Yeah,
if
that's
you notice
super
it,
important when you're shooting.
respect it. Just stop. It's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, just don't do anything. I think that's what Adam always says, like, if you're not sure what to do, don't do anything. Just stand there. You don't have
Right.
to do the thing if you're not sure what we're doing, and that way we can keep everybody safe. So,
Yeah.
all right. So Trish has a question. She wants to know, while trying to do these exercises, I get lightheaded. What should I do differently? I am in a very calm state right now.
So I guess my question is exactly which exercises, like just
Probably
any
the deep breathing, I
deep
think.
breathing. It's not unusual at first to have some lightheadedness, especially if you're not used to it, which is why it's good to do it in maybe short little, only do a few minutes at first.
Hmm.
And sometimes it's good to make sure that you're sitting down or laying down, um, because it can make you lightheaded at first until your body kind of gets used to it. So it's not necessarily that you're doing something wrong. It's just expanding your body's ability to handle it.
Okay, so she said she was breathing deep. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's not unusual, especially the longer you do it, you might have some of those shifts in your physiology. So, um, yeah, I mean, like on the line, obviously you don't want to be breathing so deeply that you get lightheaded, because that could be dangerous.
right, right.
So
Yeah.
that's where you kind of have to modulate it a little bit, um, and kind of know where your line is.
This is a good question. What breathing techniques should I do to help calm the vision and help it remain clear as normal?
Good question. I have this problem too sometimes. I have a theory. I guess I can't actually prove it because I
We need to
haven't like tested it on lots of people. I actually was telling Laura this. I sometimes will have that same experience, like in performance mode. If I'm in a musical performance, I've had that experience where my vision kind of like goes blurry,
Mhm.
or like, yeah, it just kind of goes wonky on me. And almost every time I notice that I've been holding my breath, or very shallow breathing. So you probably just need to relax. My guess, yeah, just relax.
Yeah, right.
My guess is you're holding a lot of tension in the body,
Oh,
probably.
well, that was Adam that asked the question,
Yeah,
so the answer would be yes.
yeah. So
Holding
there's
tension.
probably quite a bit of tension, which when there's tension, that can constrict our blood vessels
Ah.
and slow down blood flow. So it's probably just kind of when it happens and you have that awareness, my guess is being able to tap in and take a breath or two that helps release the tension. But that would be something really interesting to track
Hmm.
and notice. I
We
just
could we
don't
could
have enough
do
people, but you can track it this summer, right? Start tracking
Yeah,
people.
let's do a study. Oh, well, this is funny. This guy named Sam wants to know, how did you get started in breathwork and why?
I wonder why he's asking questions.
I don't know.
Um, well, the whole breathwork thing started because I had gotten into health coaching, and I noticed that there were clients who had lots of trauma. When I got into health coaching, I thought it was like, I'm going to just help people like eat better and exercise and drink enough water, and they're going to feel great. Little did I know.
There's a lot more to it, huh?
And then I was like, oh, people have these really major blocks. And it turns out that there are a lot of people with a lot of like baggage and trauma and crazy things that just telling them to change the way they eat isn't going to fix.
Mm,
I'm going to have to find some other tools.
mm,
Um, and so there was a magazine that I got, and I kept seeing these ads for this breathwork workshop. And so I called up my mom. I was like, Mom, I bet you would do this with me. Let's go. Because she's a trooper. So
Yeah.
we went to this workshop in Livingston together, and it knocked my socks off. I came home and I told Sam, I was like, well, I've never taken drugs, but I'm pretty sure that was better than any drug anyone has ever taken.
Wow.
I was like on a major high.
Wow.
And like for 2 or 3 weeks after that, I felt like so creative and so in the flow. And it was just
Wow.
like this crazy experience. I was like, I'm going to have to learn more about this. So then I went, there was some time in between there, but then I decided I was going to get serious and learn how to teach breath work, and specifically went looking for a way to do it in a trauma-informed way that would work with those particular clients that I had in mind. So,
That's
and it's
cool.
turned out to be a really, really valuable tool, both for me personally and for various clients, in helping them work through a lot of stress and trauma and kind of peel away the layers.
Yeah, there's lots of layers. That's for sure. It's not just like a one and done thing.
No,
No.
it kind of
Wouldn't
becomes,
that be nice though?
it would be nice, but unfortunately life is not that simple.
No, it's not. And on that, I think you said something about you got into the zone or in the flow or something. We talk about flow in shooting, like getting into this zone of it almost turning into an effortless endeavor, that you have so much subconscious competence built up in what you've trained to do that
Mhm.
you don't need to try hard in order to do well at it. Is there
Right.
any breathing technique, or how does that tie in with what you do? Is there like a flow state you can induce through breath?
To some degree. I mean, I'm still playing with like how this works out on the range.
Yeah.
um, like I know how it works when I'm not at the range,
Or like when
and
you're playing
I know
music?
how it works like when I'm playing music. I feel flow state there fairly frequently.
Mhm.
But I'm newest out of all the things in life. Shooting is kind of the newest arena for me, so I haven't quite gotten there
What do you do to
in
create
degree.
flow with music?
Some of it is breathing, like I'm breathing with the rhythm of the music, so there's that.
Ah.
And some of it is like shutting off the thinking brain and
Mhm.
trusting that I did the practice. My muscles know what they need to do. I've
Mhm.
practiced this 600 times. My
Mhm.
fingers know where the keys are, my foot knows where the pedal is.
Mhm.
And then you just kind of
You let
get
go.
carried away by the music, and you're
Mhm.
just enraptured by the music itself.
Mhm.
And it's a weird feeling. It's almost like you're observing yourself from
Mhm.
outside.
Yeah.
Um, and so I trust that at some point I will get there with shooting. I just haven't quite mastered it in that arena yet.
Because good shooting is like poetry or music. There's a
Mhm.
rhythm to it in a way. I mean, you're writing the recoil. And I know this sounds really weird, but it's true. Like when you really get in tune with your gun and you ride the recoil, it does feel that way, um, without getting too weird about it. But
Right.
yeah,
I
it's
mean,
all the same thing.
right. It is. And I guess I would say the closest I've gotten was last summer when Riley Bowman came, and he was doing all those vision
Yeah.
exercises with us. And
Yeah.
I mean, that was challenging for me, but that was the moment where I was like, okay, I think I can see that I could possibly get there.
Yeah. And that's why training with all different types of instructors is really important, I think, because each brings something different to the table. Prescott says long range precision will force you to breathe consistently, calmly, and requires you to focus on your breath patterns. So there you go.
Absolutely.
And then Trish wants to know as well, do you ever travel to do a group session? How often do clients generally visit you to establish their good breathing patterns? Is it weeks or months?
So yes, I do travel to do group sessions. Um, and I will do live group sessions or online group sessions. There's lots of different options. Um, it kind of depends a little bit on the person and how dysfunctional their breathing patterns are, how much we have to retrain.
Okay.
But, probably like half a dozen, 4 to 6 sessions is enough to at least give them all the tools, teach them all the main patterns, and get them going in the right direction is usually enough. And it can be pretty well customized to the person. Some people are like, let's dive in and do this really consistently, and other people are like, yeah, we'll do it once a month until I kind of feel like I've got all the tools I need. So it can be pretty customized.
Okay. Cool. Scars wants to know, are there any specific exercises to diffuse chronic pain?
Yes.
Yes.
The trick there, I guess there's two things to say. Sometimes when you really start breathing, sometimes you will actually feel like it heightens the pain for a little bit, just because you suddenly have more acute awareness in your body. But if you can really drop into that really nice diaphragmatic breathing, and you almost picture sending the breath to the location where the pain is, and it's almost just this imagery of allowing the breath to soften and expand that space. It is really not unusual after a full breathwork session for someone to be like, oh my goodness, my shoulder finally quit hurting, or oh, that headache I walked in with, it's gone, or oh yeah, my low back feels so much better now. So there's something about deeply oxygenating the body that helps to release tension and pain in the body.
That's awesome. Man, guys, you are asking such good questions. Thank you so much for those great questions. And Robert was talking about at the bottom of the breath, at the end of the breath, where the momentary pause is. If you're doing precision shooting, that's when you break through the wall and pull the trigger. So
yes,
yeah, it is kind of crazy how this all correlates. I mean, it's not, because we're breathing every day and we're breathing while we're shooting. So why don't we use it to our advantage, right? We should try to do that.
The piece I feel like we have to figure out, maybe you can help me figure this out, Laura, and maybe Adam can too when he comes, is when we start picking up the speed, and Adam's doing those, you're going to shoot at the speed of terror, like, how do I sync this up with my breath?
Right.
I think that's where I tend to like, bang, 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 bang. And then I'm like, oh, okay. It's
Yeah,
done.
but like that rapid succession of shooting, once you let go, can actually be like just as calming and freeing as precision shooting. I mean, it took me a long time to even think that way, but I think it's actually a thing. Like once you get there, it takes time, but
I think so. That's your job with me this summer.
Okay. I'll make that my assignment for you, Bethel. And then I'm sure you'll have plenty of assignments for me with the breath work.
Sounds like a plan.
We're all works in progress. Am I right?
Of course.
Yes.
Always.
Well, thank you so much for your time tonight. I don't know how that hour went by so fast, but is there anything that you want to leave people with? Obviously, go to, what is it? Sage Wellness MT, as in Montana.com. That's where people can look you up. You have a vlog there, so you've got videos posted on the vlog page, and then they can look you up, Sage Wellness Center MT on Facebook.
Yeah. Let's see, parting thoughts. So I guess I would say the big thing is, we do have the ability to modulate and shift our physical state, our mental state, our emotional state. Do you have to get used to the bang before you can breathe through it?
Is he asking me that or you? I think you probably do have to get used to the
I
bang.
think so.
Yeah.
I think so. That's probably another safety thing, just
Yeah.
getting to the point where your nervous system goes, okay, fine, there's a bunch of noise and a bunch of banging, but
I'm okay.
I know that I'm actually okay.
Right. Yeah.
That's probably true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Way to interrupt, Prescott. Anyway, as you were saying.
We do have much more agency and more power than we think to actually shift our physical, mental, emotional state. And we can use that in a very intentional way. we kind of ran short on time. We didn't have a lot of time to talk about like the
We can keep
emotional.
going if you want.
Well, we don't want to keep everybody, but we didn't have a lot of time to talk about kind of that emotional intelligence piece. But once you really learn to use your breath, it can be very helpful, especially like if you're in a tense situation or a difficult conversation or dealing with a cantankerous child or, fill in the blank, something going on at work. When you tap into the breath, it can be really amazing how it can shut off your desire to fight or say something stupid or hurtful.
Right.
And it can really just help you pause and slow down, and it can kind of clear your mind and give you just that little bit of time to go, okay, what do I actually need to do here?
Right.
So instead of constantly reacting, kind of having that instant knee-jerk reaction to things, you can instead calmly respond in an appropriate way, which is something that most people aren't trained to do. Like, how many people do we know who just have a short fuse because they never learned how to manage it? They never learned how to deal with it.
Yeah. I don't think some people want to either. There has to be a willingness, I think.
I don't know. I think sometimes people with a short fuse, like, ask my mother. I had a fuse about this long as a kid.
No way, really?
Super short. It still happens sometimes.
Wow.
But I would say, as one of those people, there's usually actually a lot of regret and shame immediately afterwards. You feel really ashamed that you just blew up like a volcano.
Yeah.
And you're like, that was really not right. That wasn't okay.
Yeah.
But then you're so embarrassed that you're like, I can't go back and say anything else.
Right.
So I think there actually is some, like, for people who do struggle with anger, they probably actually do feel some frustration that they can't figure out how to control it. I mean, that's probably not the case for everybody, but I suspect that's the case for a lot of people.
Yeah. And that's no way to live either. I mean,
right.
Yeah.
And then there are people who just feel shut down, like they just feel flat. They're disconnected. They don't feel anything. And then it bothers them that they can't connect. Like, they don't feel connected in their relationships, or they don't feel spiritually connected. They don't feel like they can give and receive love, which is a really tough place to be in. So I guess all of that rattling on to say,
I love it,
that using things like breathwork, and there are lots of other tools that we can use to help us learn how to actually work through those things, help us learn what to do with our anger, help us learn what to do with our sadness, help us learn how to actually connect in a healthy way with other people.
Yeah.
So that's probably one of the biggest things. So it's great on that front, but it's also great just for everyday things, or for disciplines like shooting, or anything where you kind of have to have that little bit of performance anxiety that pops up, or any sport really, or any situation where you can kind of get stuck in your head. It's an amazing, beautiful tool that you have available to you, and it's free.
It's free.
You just have to use it.
Yeah. You just have to know how to use it, and Bethel can help you know how to use it. You're doing such good work. I'm just so happy to know you. You're just a great human. You've helped me in so many ways that I won't even get into, because I'll just start crying on the show, which would just be, I got to have shows where I don't cry. That's as important once in a while. But you're doing really good work, and I can only imagine how rewarding that it is. And so thank you for what you do. And thanks for sharing just like a little tidbit with us, so that we can kind of maybe navigate down a better direction, so we can be better in our everyday lives.
Thank you. Thank you for all that you're doing, Laura. We love and appreciate you too. And we're so happy that you showed up on the scene and you're a part of our life now.
I'm on the scene now. You can't get rid of me.
We don't want to.
All right, cool. Well, you don't leave the studio. Stay in the green room, and I'll be there in just a minute.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Bethel. All right, guys. So let's wrap up for this evening. What did you think of that conversation with Bethel Wagner? I thoroughly enjoyed it. She has so much more information than what she offered even tonight. And she has a lot of good information. And so I do encourage you to go to her website, check out what she's doing, and reach out to her and learn a little bit more. So really quickly before we wrap up, I just want to thank all of you guys who are my paid supporters on locals.com. And even if you're not a paid supporter, thank you for watching. I appreciate all of you. The locals community, if you're not sure what that is where I post exclusive Defenders Live content that you won't see anywhere else, including early access to special Defenders Live episodes. And it's where I host Defenders Uncensored. And I have something cooking. Man, I wish I could tell you about it, but I've got something cooking right now for Defenders Uncensored. I think you guys are really going to enjoy. Defenders Uncensored is a series of roundtable discussions where we talk candidly about issues that some consider controversial, but we don't think should be. And they're on locals because they might not be approved on other platforms. So if you want to come join the Defenders Live community on locals.com, go there and search up Defenders Live. We hope to see you over there. Next week, we are going to have Mr. Cade Lamb, who is the son of Mark Lamb, a sheriff in Arizona and candidate for U.S. Senate. His dad is. He's not. And Cade is the founder of Fear Not, Do Right. It's a podcast on YouTube, and he does have a website as well. And he's interviewed people such as Mike Glover, Eli Crane, Craig Sawyer, and many others. Also, stay tuned in the future. We're also going to have Austin Knudsen on, the Attorney General of Montana. Gabe New will be on, and if you guys don't know these names, I will be announcing them in future episodes. Cassie Crago, Mike Ox, Sandra Woodruff, and Whitney Lindsay of Heligunner, as well as Tiffany Johnson and AJ Zito will be in the lineup for this. Are we in the spring? Yeah, in the spring and summer months. I'm really looking forward to future episodes of Defenders Live and sharing even more wonderful people with all of you. Thank you guys for tuning in tonight. I'll see you next Wednesday, 7 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time. Until then, take care.